prices are just information, right? So if we start from a first principle of prices are information, then we can work backward from there, which is information is just information. Some information is politically inconvenient for certain people and needs to be managed. And a way to manage prices is by distorting them.
Price signals, yeah.
By distorting price signals. And the way you distort price signals is price controls or one way or another. And there's different ways you can do that. You can put in yield. Ultimately, they usually have a center around some form of increased currency unit creation to do that. And I think that is when you start and work back from that first principle, then once you can do that in the shadows for a while, and that's fine. You can do it around the edges and around the margins. However, if you do it too big and you do it too obvious, then you run the risk of basically poisoning the psychology, of shifting the psychology in a permanent way. Also, if you demonstrate the measurables, right? Or you demonstrate the Pavlovian bells that you respond to, the signals that you try to cap, then you start to see the markets, who are very smart and very forward-looking, watch those Pavlovian bells and the things that might make them ring, because then they will be able to say, I don't have to wait till that bell rings. I know you're not going to let it ring. And I know this, it's like a Rube Goldberg trap, right? Where, okay, if that bell rings, you're going to add liquidity, and this lever is feeling pressure and it's coming towards, and it's going to hit where it is. And I'm watching that lever, because as soon as it gets near that bell, maybe I'll get the timing a little off, but I'm not going to be wrong. That's just a positioning, right? So the markets will start watching that, and I think that's what we started to see, which was all the way back in 08, 09. Oh gosh, fundamentals are slowing. We know the banking system isn't going to be allowed to fail now. That was the big thing.
Right. Too big to fail.
So if the banking system isn't going to be allowed to fail, and this data is showing us we're heading back into recession, as was absolutely happening as you moved through certainly late 09 and into early to mid 2010, markets started discounting that the big political thing, okay, the banks won't be allowed to fail, then recession will not be allowed to happen. And if recession cannot happen, or else the banks will fail, then it won't be allowed to happen. And buy stocks on a coming recession. And and the problem then is, once you do that once, you haven't fixed the underlying problem.
Right.
And so now it's not like the debt has gone down. The issues that caused the original problem, they've been moved, right?
They've been worsened, haven't they? Because now aren't you now incentivizing people to invest more in the financial sector because it's not going to be allowed to fail? So moving capital out of the real economy into the financial sector, which accelerates or exacerbates the process of financialization, something like that?
Yeah, it's right. So we started with the problems we did .com. We didn't want bubble burst. We didn't want to deal with it. So we kicked it upstairs to the housing market. We built a housing bubble. It burst. We didn't want to deal with it properly. So we kicked it upstairs to the sovereign level. Now the sovereign bubble is fine. It's not a problem until you have inflation. Once you have inflation and a sovereign debt bubble, you're done. And that gets to your point of, yes, it makes it worse, because now people are moving into financial assets rather than productively allocating capital. So now you're, what are we, at least 15, 16 years into a gross misallocation of productive capital. And that misallocation of resources showed up in COVID. What do we hear all the time? Well, it wasn't that we printed all the money. It was just supply chain problems. What's a supply chain problem? A supply chain problem is nothing other than the Pavlovian bell of 16 years of misallocation of capital into, monkey JPEGs and stuff instead of investing in supply chains.
Yeah.
And so now you get into the spot where the debt's gotten higher. It's still a sovereign debt bubble. You now have endemic inflation. And now you want to invest in supply chains, which is, I think, going to happen. I think needs to happen. It's a good thing.
Right.
But it's not going to be deflationary.
Right.
So guess what? You're going to have to do the mother of all. You're going to have to do the mother of all signal, price signal, muffles, right? You're going to have to strangle the $130 trillion bond market in the crib. You're going to have to put a pillow over its head and hold it down until it stays at 4% on the 10-year. And whether inflation is 10 or 20, doesn't matter. You're going to have to. Or you can't reshore. To your point, it's like any great, it's like the Madoff Ponzi scheme, right? Like the little lie becomes the bigger lie.
Right.
There's Enron, the little lie, the bigger, big. And sooner or later it gets so big, you can't hide it. And now we're at a point where the price signal that needs to be distorted is the price of money, but it needs to be distorted like in a $130 trillion market.
Right.
That's not going to be 5 or 6% CPI. Right. That's not how that works. We're talking about double-digit levels of inflation, and arguably we might have already had that, right? To the point of the whole. Larry Summers said, "Hey, if we calculated inflation the way we did pre-'83, it peaked at 18%." This is Larry Summers, who's a very good academic. Say what you will of himself. He's not my guy. He's not my kind of guy. I don't particularly care for him that much, but he's very bright and he's a very good academic, and inflation might have already been double digits. Yeah. And it wasn't enough. It was not enough to get the debt down. It was not enough to reshore and rebuild anything. We didn't do anything. We just handed stuff out.
If you enjoyed this clip, click here for the full episode and here for more just like it. Also, like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money and subscribe to stay connected. Thank you.